In today's fast growing major economy, a quiet fiscal battle is brewing. It is a conflict between welfare and waste, colloquially known as the freebie culture. While the term revenue has sparked a political firestorm, the underlying economic reality is far from sobering. As of 2026, the warning lights of fiscal dashboards are flashing red. Several Indian states, notably Punjab, Rajasthan, and Kerala and Tamil Nadu, have seen their debt to GSDP ratios climb towards or even exceed 35 to 40% mark. To put that in perspective, the encasing committee recommended a ceiling of 20% for states. The core problem is fiscal prolificacy. This isn't just a fancy term for spending too much. It's a structural imbalance where a short-term electoral gains through non-merit subsidies come at the direct expense of a long-term capital expenditure. When a state spends its budget on free electricity or consumer durables rather than building a bridge or a medical college, it is essentially trading tomorrow's growth for today's votes. This leads to a dreaded debt trap. A debt trap. We calculate the sustainability of this debt using the primary deficit. If a state's interest payments exceed its revenue growth, it must borrow just to pay the interest on previous loans. The formula for debt dynamics is often expressed as delta of D is equal to R minus G divided by 1 plus G dt minus 1 minus P of P, where D is the debt to GDP ratio, R is the real interest rate, G is the real growth rate, and PB is the primary balance. If R is greater than G, then the debt spirals. For several Indian states in 2026, the interest to revenue receipts ratio has crossed 25%, meaning 1 out of every 4 rupees earned goes straight to the bank before a single student is fed or a road is paved. Now, to put a historical context to this, India has a proud and necessary tradition of welfare. We must distinguish between welfare and freebies. The midday meal scheme pioneered in Tamil Nadu is a gold standard for a merit good. It is just a meal, it is an investment in the nutrition that increases school enrollment and long term labor productivity. It builds human capital. However, the lines have blurred. The economic distinction lies in the negative versus possible externalities. For example, merit goods include education, healthcare, and sanitation. They have a high multiplier effect. Non merit goods such as free electricity above basic needs, loan waivers, and free consumer electronics. These often lead to resource depletion like groundwater over extraction and often zero return on investment for a state's productive capacity. The barriers to reform are twofold. First, a political barrier. In a competitive federalism, the freebies act as an entry fee for power. Once a benefit is granted, withdrawing it is seen as a political suicide, a phenomenon known as benefit entrenchment. Second, the definition barrier. There is no constitutional or legal definition of what a freebie is. Is a free bus pass for women a freebie? Economists argue it's merit good because it increases female labor force participation. Is free 200 units of electricity a freebie? That's why the debate gets murky. Without a legal ceiling, fiscal slippage becomes the path of least resistance. If the debt to GSDP ratio looks bad, the reality might be worse. Enter the world of off budget borrowings. To bypass the borrowing limit set by Center under the Article 293, subsection 3 of the Constitution, states must have mastered the art of shadow finance. States use state owned enterprises or special purpose vehicles to borrow money. The state government guarantees these loans, but they don't appear on the main budget. The Comptroller and the Auditor General, the CAG, has repeatedly red flagged this. In some states, the OBB account for an additional 4% to 5% of its GSDP that isn't officially counted in the fiscal deficit. This is fiscal smoke and mirrors when these SOEs often power distribution companies. When these SOEs, such as often distribution power companies like DISCOMs, inevitably fail to pay, the burden falls back on the taxpayer. As of 2026, the total outstanding guarantees given by state government have reached record highs, creating contingent liability that could trigger a systemic financial crisis if even one of the major states default. We need to move towards a holistic accounting. Transparency isn't just a buzzword, it's a survival mechanism. If you don't account for every rupee borrowed in the name of state, you're flying a plane while ignoring the fuel gauge. So, how do we fix a system incentivized for overspending? We need three structural pillars of reform. First, the independent fiscal councils. Currently, the government marks its own homework. We need an autonomous body similar to the GSA Council or the Congressional Budget Office in the US to vet election manifestos. Before a party makes a promise of free X, the Fiscal Council must publish a fiscal impact statement detailing exactly how much it will cost and which hospital or school budget will be cut to pay for it. Second is the capping of non-merit subsidies. We must implement a rules-based fiscal policy where non-merit subsidies are capped at a fixed percentage, perhaps 10% of a state's own tax revenue. This ensures that if a state wants to be generous, it must first be productive. Third, the tightening of the FRBM framework. The Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act needs teeth. We must move beyond targets to enforcement. This includes a standardized classification of expenditure to stop states from labeling consumption as developmental expenditure through creative accounting. So, what is the roadmap? So, the roadmap to 2030 can be as follows. Phase 1, like in 2026 to 2027, mandated disclosure of all off-budget borrowings and the implementation of FRPM norms at the municipal level. Phase 2, that is from 2028 to 2029, the introduction of welfare audits. We must stop measuring success by how much money we spent and start measuring by how much the GDP per capita actually grew in the target demographic. And by 2030, we must achieve a sustainable national debt to GDP ratio of below 60%, center and state combined. India stands at a crossroads. One path leads to a middle income trap where debt servicing eats our future. The other leads to a $10 trillion economy powered by a world-class infrastructure and highly skilled workforce. Growth cannot be bought with populist checks. It must be built with capital and discipline. While welfare is a moral duty, fiscal discipline is economic necessity that ensures we can afford that duty for generations to come. The price of free is simply too high for a nation with ambitions. It's time to choose a temporary sugar rush or a permanent strength. Thank you.